What are some key takeaways from Putin's address this year?
Well, big developments here in Russia because President Vladimir Putin, for the first time, has proposed changes to the country's constitution that fuels speculation also about his own future. He suggested a number of changes in this speech. Broadly speaking, it's about slightly reducing the powers of president, expanding the powers of parliament, of the state council. And he also discussed presidential term limits. It's quite complicated, but he suggested removing the word consecutive from any discussion of presidential term limits, which would in effect prevent any future presidents doing what he did and standing again as president after a break, after his initial 2 term limits. So the reason that all of this is important, it's important in and of itself, but it's also just going to be discussed in the context of Vladimir Putin's own future, because he's in his final term as president at the moment. Under the current constitution, he's not allowed to stand again. So the speculation there that perhaps this paves the way, perhaps he's planning to stay on in some other capacity after he finishes, perhaps as prime minister, for example, with some expanded powers. At the moment, that's all speculation, but these constitutional changes that he's proposing are in themselves fairly significant. He said that the people should have the chance to vote on constitutional changes, so we may also be looking at a nationwide referendum at some point in the future.
Well, Lucy, the address comes at a time when Putin is suffering from low approval ratings. So how are people there reacting to his speech and also the issues he aims to tackle, for example, changes to the constitution?
Well, yes, this is all happening in the context of fairly low approval ratings for President Putin. It's now 20 years since he first took office as president. But the last year has been marred by, as you say, low approval ratings, protests, slow economic growth. And unusually for the president, he didn't use this speech, as he often does, to focus on foreign policy, on Russia's place in the world. It was very much a discussion of domestic issues. Before these constitutional changes, he also discussed a number of policy changes that he wanted to make, focusing on things like how to help families, healthcare, schools. And he actually addressed those problems quite directly. He said he knows that there's a feeling for change in Russia. He knows that it's his job to make the conditions to create change. He wants a direct dialogue with the people. He wants people's direct participation in making those changes. This basically was his chance to convince the people that he's the right person to help Russians improve their quality of life. He even said that he's giving this address a little bit earlier in the year than he usually does because there's so much to be done, and he really wants to get on with the business of improving people's lives here in Russia.
Well, thanks so much, Lucy. Lucy Taylor bringing us the latest from Moscow.